Hi, this is Steve from PixelBump. Welcome to the Cooking Show Open tutorial. Let's take a look at what we're going to make today. So we have a really nice map burn away effect, a nice little camera move into a 3D set, and some fire elements to give it a little extra excitement. Now in the past we've looked at a couple different opens that I've made, and I've really just pointed out my favorite thing that I've done in that open. In this one we're going to go through the entire process from building this in Cinema 4D to compositing it in After Effects. And I'm going to go through the same process I go through every day when I'm making packages for television shows. So let's get started. First thing we need to do is create some text in Cinema 4D. And I'm going to use the MoText because I'm going to want to add a little animation. And the MoText object makes it a lot easier to do that. So let's split it up into two pieces. We'll have the barbecue piece, and then I will copy and paste that to the pig cookers, my new my new cooking show for barbecue. Alright, so I'm going to take both of these and I'm going to make them middle because I want both of them to be aligned from the middle. Let's move barbecue up. And now let's look at the font. And I already know which one I want to use on this. And as you can see, as you can see, I've accumulated a lot of fonts over the last 10 years. But for this one, I wanted to use Mesquite. Has a very nice look for our barbecue show. So I'm going to take this guy, let's shrink him down a little bit. Bring him down here. We can zoom in. And I'm going to want to look at the caps. And I'm going to want to use a fillet cap on both of them. And what I'm going to want to do is increase the steps. As long as we have a step of 1, we'll never get a nice rounded bevel on this guy. I usually jump this up to 5 for both of them, and there we can start seeing it's rounding off a lot nicer. But it's a little too heavy. So I'm just going to bring it down. I just want a little bit of edge. That's looking better. And let's go ahead and give it a little more depth. There we go. And now what I want to do is copy these guys, and I'm going to go into their caps, and I'm going to increase them a little bit so they're a little wider. And then I'm just going to set them back in Z space a little bit. This will give our text a nice outline and help it pop when it's against the background. We'll use a nice metallic color for the text and maybe a dark metallic color for the outline. Now let's go ahead and add a couple of the flourishes. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab a cube, and if we look at it in our orthographic views, I'll just get it set down underneath here and bring it out until it's even on both sides as a base. And same here. Just want to make sure it's like that. And we'll go ahead, give that a little rounding. And again, what we'll do is we'll duplicate it, but I'm going to parent it underneath, so that way when I animate, they will animate together. And let's go ahead and just bring up the size a little bit here and there. And there we go. Now we've got the same kind of outline happening on the 3D base. So let's go ahead, name this one base, and I will go ahead and duplicate it. I'm going to bring it up here, and let's go ahead and change the X. This one we'll have to kind of sort out. That's not bad. And we'll move the X in here. And that looks just about right, actually. Sometimes you get lucky the first time. And we'll call this star base left. And we'll go ahead and duplicate that again. And we'll call this one the right. And we'll bring this guy over. And then we'll go ahead, duplicate those one more time, and we'll call these the tops. And we'll get these guys lined up. There we go. And now we need some stars. And to make the stars, I'm just going to come in and grab a star outline. And I'll drop it down to 5 points. There we go. And then we'll go ahead and rotate it into position. Oops. Oh. There we go. 18. So now I can come back and I'll just scale this guy until he's about right in place. Okay. Then I'll grab an extrude object. I'll call this star. And take it back about 30. Go ahead and put some caps on it. Increase the number of steps. Maybe just do a 1 here, just enough to give it a tiny bit of edge. We don't want to do anything too much here. And for this one, we'll go ahead and duplicate that again. We'll call that the star back, or star stroke. Keep the language consistent. And we'll come and add a little bit of width to it here. Yep, that's nice. That's just about perfect. And we'll offset this guy a little bit there. And then I'm going to go ahead and group these and call this the star full. And then, just to make it easier for animation later, I'm going to come over here, grab my axis tool, and just move it here to the center. All right, so now let's just duplicate out a couple more of these stars. I want to have 3 on each side. There we go. Make sure their spacing looks good. That looks nice. Then we can go ahead and group these one more time. We'll call these stars left, and then these ones will be the stars for the right. All right, so we've got our logo coming together here. Let's move these stars to the bottom, and we'll go ahead and group this whole thing into the text logo. Now, what might be nice on this is, since we're going to go with a metallic look, is to give it a little bit of a bend. The bend will help the reflection be seen a lot easier. So what I'll do is I'll add a bend just under my main null, and I'll click to keep the y-axis length, and I'm going to go to an unlimited, and then I'm going to start bending. And we can see right away that our axes are no good. So just go 90 degrees and 90 degrees. There we go. Now we're starting to get a nice little bend. But we can see our platforms here are not bending, and that's because they don't have enough segments. So I'm just going to come in and add 10 to everybody there. And I'm going to come down here, add 10 to all of these ones as well. Oops. There we go. There, now we have a nice bend happening over the whole logo. And we don't need it to be too big of a bend. We just want it to be enough to give a little bit of shape to the text. All right, let me go ahead and hide this guy so I don't have to see it while I'm working. And that's looking pretty good. I think that's definitely going to work. So now we need to make our grill. And to make the grill, I'm going to come in here, make a sphere, and make it a bit larger than our text, so it looks like the text can sit on top of the grill. And I'm going to go ahead and go up to 90 segments. There we go. And then I'll go ahead and make my object editable, switch over to the faces. I'm going to grab my rectangular selection and turn off only select visual elements, because what I want to do is come in here and just grab all of these polygons for the top half and just delete them out. Just delete them out. There we go. All right, so now we've got a nice little base for our grill. And maybe what we can do here is offset it a little bit, and then we'll just scale it up so it looks a little bit in front of the text. There we go. Now the next part for the grill, let's do the actual grill grates. And for that I'll just use some cylinders. And I'll just change their orientation so they run along the z-axis. And I will take their radius down fairly small, maybe 8, 7, and make sure it's long enough that it's going to cover that whole grill. There we go, that's good. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take a cloner object. I'm going to drop it in, and under my cloner I'm going to keep linear, but instead of moving them on the y-axis, right now they're going up, we're going to change them over to the x-axis so they go out. And we'll figure out what our spacing is. And we'll move this into position here. There we go. Now we can just click up until our grill has been covered. Now we can go ahead and move these guys down into position here. And we have them sticking out all around the edges. And that's okay, because we're going to come in and grab a tube, and we'll just scale this guy up. Until it surrounds the whole thing. Down, and then we'll just increase the inner radius until it's just about in line with the kettle of the grill. Now we can take a Boolean object and drop these two in, and we'll just switch the order, and there we go. We have nice grill marks now. Nice grill grate. And to kind of finish this off, I'm going to grab a torus, move that into position. We'll go ahead and increase here, and then we'll go ahead and decrease the pipe radius and increase the ring radius. There we go. That's what we want. And then we'll just bring that back down into line. And let's go ahead and make sure visually, yeah, see, we don't want them to be sticking out beyond it. So we'll just bring that radius out until it matches up there. And maybe just bring it up a little bit. There we go, so the grill pieces don't stick out too much. All right, so we're getting there. Our grill is looking pretty good, but it needs some handles. And those are going to be pretty simple to make. What I'm going to do is just grab my favorite little spline tool, which is the B-spline. I just like the way this one operates. And I'm just going to kind of click around here and start making a handle shape. Try to keep it fairly even on both sides. And I'm not worried about this being too perfect, but I don't want it to be overly sloppy either. I'd like it to look nice. There we go. That'll work. And I'm going to go ahead and grab a rectangle, and then I'm going to grab a sweep. I'm going to put the rectangle and the spline all together under the sweep, and we've got an unholy mess. And what we need to do is bring down our scales here on both of these. And then we want to change our plane, there we go, on the rectangle. So now we can start seeing, there we go, maybe height of 40 and the width around 5. That's looking pretty good. And we'll call this the handle. Handle. And we'll go ahead and bring it down just a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and grab a symmetry so we can have a handle on both sides. Now, the last thing we really need to make here are two pieces of little wooden support for the handles. And those will just come from a simple cube. Just make sure it's a little bit longer than the handle itself. There we go. And we'll make sure we're in the correct position in the y-axis. And we'll go ahead and again use a symmetry so that we have it on both sides. Sure. There we go. And let's go ahead and give this one a little rounding as well. There we go. I think we've got a very nice model for our grill. Now, let's make sure we name everything. So now we've got our grill, and we'll call this the kettle. Okay, and we'll group this guy all together to be grill full. All right, so we've got our text and we've got our grill. Now we need to start setting up our scene. So I'm going to bring in a camera, and I'm going to go into my render settings, change this over to 1920 by 1080, and I'm going to change my frame rate here to 24, and if I go to my project settings, I'm going to change that to 24, and just while I have this open, I'm going to turn my anti-aliasing to best and use sync as my filter. And I'm going to drop these guys down quite a bit. Usually I go about 5, 2, and 5. It really helps speed up the render, and for 90% of situations I really haven't noticed a quality drop. So feel free to use what you want. This is something I do so that I can render as fast as possible. Now let's go ahead and look through our camera, and it's okay, but I want to change my focal length. And one thing to keep in mind when using a camera is the default is, it is okay, and sometimes it's going to be the length you want. But remember that a human's eye sees at about a 50mm lens, a focal length of 50. That's about what you see when you look at things. So if you want it to be bigger and more dynamic, you want to go with a lower number. If you want it to feel more compressed and more like a portrait, you'll go with a higher number. In this case, I want to go very dynamic. So I'm going to go down to maybe a 24mm lens. Maybe go down to 22. There we go. That's starting to give me, I'm starting to see the shape of that bend really nicely. If I position this guy down so we're looking up, I think that's more or less what I'm looking for. But I'm going to need to rotate my grill a little bit. There we go. So that I can see that really nicely. Let's jump forward a bit. And there we go. That's looking pretty good. Feels nice and big and dynamic. And I think we're about ready to go into texturing. Actually, before I do that, I'm noticing one little thing in my torus. And it's just it doesn't have enough segments yet. So I'm going to go with 90 and 36. And that's just going to help make it look really nice in the render. All right, so when I'm setting up the materials that I want to use, I go to the content browser first and try to see if there's something that somebody's already made that will make my life easier. And I know I'm going to want to use an HDR around this guy to reflect. So let's pick something that's nice and outdoorsy. Maybe that guy. And you'll see it's right here in my materials now. And I'm going to go to the Visualize pack. There's a lot of really nice materials that come with Cinema 4D that are going to make our jobs easier. So here, let's see, maybe a stainless steel we can try, maybe a painted metal texture, and maybe a nice wooden texture for the handle. Something that has some nice age to it. There we go. Let's start with these and see how far that's going to get us. So to use the HDR, I'm going to create a sphere, and I'm just going to bring its size up until I'm sure it's bigger than even where I want to bring my camera. So I'm going to want to move that camera a bit, and that looks like that'll be big enough. I'm going to drop the HDR onto the sphere. I'm going to turn off its visibility, and then I'm going to put a compositing tag on it. I'm just going to click off Scene by Camera. So that way it will be seen by the materials, but we won't see it in our render. So let's go ahead, open up everything again here. And for the kettle, we'll try the black material. And for those handles, we'll try the wood. And for the grate, we'll try the chrome for the stainless steel. Let's see what that gets us. Go ahead and do a preview. That's looking pretty good. I really like the metal. The metal's coming off really well. I like the wood. I'm not in love with this, with the kettle itself. Let me see if there's anything in here that I think is better. If not, we'll start tweaking this material. Or maybe something like that. I want more texture in it. So let's try switching that out. See where that gets us. Oh yeah, we're definitely getting a lot more nice texture here, but the texture is just a little too big for me right now. So I'm going to come into the bump, and I'm going to come into my overlays. I'm just going to drop them by half. So it's just a smaller, tighter texture. All right, that's looking much better. I like that a lot. So let's go ahead and texture up here. And what I'm going to want to do is open up my stars, my bases, and we'll texture all these guys. So the front of the text, I'm going to try out that metal, that same stainless steel. And then I'm going to try that darker color here for the backing. And I'm going to do the same with everything else. So steel on all of the front-facing objects, and the lead darker material for all of the outlines. And we'll go ahead and do this for all these stars. And again, for all of the backing. I think I have these reversed on the stars, I just noticed. I was so busy just dropping the materials in, I wasn't looking at what was happening. So let me flip these guys back over. There we go. All right, so let's take a quick preview, see how that's looking. And so far, I'm really liking what I'm seeing. Even without any lighting, this is starting to look really interesting. And I can definitely see the potential. I think the only thing I want to change immediately is this lead color is just a little too gray. So I'm just going to come into its color channel and just darken it up. Get it closer to black. There we go. That's much nicer. Much better. Now this here, the pig cookers text, is looking a little flat. Even with the bend, we're getting some nice highlights on the edges, but there's really just nothing catching the front. And I think we can fix that pretty easily. What we're going to want to do is grab a plane, and we'll go ahead and change it to the x-axis. We'll stretch it out a little bit, and we're going to make ourselves a reflector. I'm going to bring it up, and I'm going to rotate it into position. Maybe somewhere around there. We'll have to kind of feel this out, see what's going to look best. Let's create a new material, and this one will have nothing in it but a luminance channel, just bright white. We'll drop it on our plane, and we'll add another compositing tag, so we don't want that to be seen by the camera either. There we go. Now we're getting a really nice white cut along the text, just making it look a lot more interesting. All right, we're definitely getting there. So let's go ahead and look at lighting a little bit. So I'm going to grab a spotlight, and I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. I want to create a kicker light for the back of the text, kind of for the top here. And let's go ahead and rotate it down, widen it out quite a bit. Get it right over the top here. There we go. And in my light settings, I'm going to turn the fall off to inverse square. I find this just gives a really nice look to the light itself. It also makes it a lot more controllable and easier to paint with. So we'll try something like that, and maybe leave this one as a white light, 100%. That seems pretty good. Now I'm going to duplicate, and we'll call this backlight. I'll duplicate it. I'm going to just zero out our rotation. And I'm going to position this guy just off to the side here. We want to bring it down and rotate it down there. And we'll call this one key light. And this one we'll do it maybe 75%, and we'll give it a little bit of an orange color to it. Let's just warm it up just a little bit. And then we'll create a second one, which we'll call the fill light. and maybe go down to 65%, and we'll give this one just a little bit of blue. And here, just enter a negative and spin it around until it's where I want it to be. And let's see what we're working with now. Okay, so I think the last thing I want to do for lighting here is I'm just going to come in, grab a point light, and put it down in the grill. So I want to give the grill its own light. It's a nice hot light. So maybe an orange, very low, and let's see it without any fall off. I want to make sure it's not throwing so hard that it affects all the text above it. But yeah, it's not strong enough. So let's go ahead, turn on its throw, and we'll turn up its brightness and just bring down its area of influence. So it's really just affecting the grill area. There we go. Now I can start to see that orange in it. So when we add some fire inside the grill in After Effects, there's actually a little bit of lighting around the edges of the grill to help sell how hot it is. Okay, I'm liking this a lot. So let's go ahead and do a little animation with it. And what I'm going to do is just pull my camera back somewhere around here, maybe. You know what? No, let's not just do a pullback. I think I'm going to need a target for this. So I'm going to come in, call this my target, and I don't want it to be a child of the camera, but I want to add a target tag. And this is the same as if you would have selected a target camera here. It's the exact same setup. So I'm going to go ahead, grab my target, make sure it's in about the right position for my final frame. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to animate, I'm going to keyframe the rotation and position on both the camera and the target. I don't really need to animate the rotation of the target, but since I have them both selected, it's fine. Now here what I'll do is I'm going to bring my camera up till it's just over the top. Maybe bring it in a little bit. Bring my camera target down. And I'll bring my camera a little more centered. There we go. And I'm going to spin it a good 180 degrees. And I'll set a keyframe here at the beginning. Now what I should get, yeah, it's a nice spinny animation. It's a fun dynamic move. I like it. I think I'll have it go the other way though. So let me go back to the beginning. And instead of negative 180, I'll just do a regular 180. And there we go. All right. So now let's animate in some of these elements. And let's close up everybody's groups. And I think what I want to do, is as this is coming back, I want to grab a Pig Cooker's logo and just move that, oops, on the Z, and hopefully, yeah, we'll get it going right in between. Perfect. So we'll bring it out here, And we'll set their keyframes. And then we'll bring them all the way back here. Set those keyframes. There we go. That's fun. Now I think for the base and all the bases, we'll set keyframes for them. And we will start just pulling them around here. Just keep going left and right with them. Offset them a little bit so they won't all land at the exact same moment. Set those keyframes. There we go. And for the barbecue, I'll go ahead, start that back here. Set its last keyframe. Set it all the way in the back. And what we should also do with that is come to the object and animate its height, so it will grow larger as it comes forward. There we go. And the last thing we're going to want to do is animate our stars. And so for each of these, I'm just going to set a couple keyframes here. And here we'll say the scale is at 1. Go back maybe 5 frames. Zero everything out. Move it over 3 there for the final resting place. And we'll go to maybe 1.2 on everything here, so they'll do a nice little squash and stretch in. All right. Now what we can do is go into our timeline, grab all these guys, and just start offsetting them so that they don't all happen at the exact same moment. Okay, let's go ahead and just kind of walk through that. Here are all my stars. Text comes in. I think that's looking pretty sharp. Let's go ahead and do a preview. Make sure we've got something that looks nice. Just do a hardware preview. It's QuickTime. And that should preview pretty quickly. All right, that looks nice. Let's see what our final render here is going to look like one more time. See if there's any other changes that should be made before we hit the render button. I think that looks really good. I think that's going to composite really nicely. So let's go ahead and call this Pig Cookers version 3. And we'll come in and set some render options. So we've already got our anti-aliasing and our render depth set up. I want to make sure I'm outputting an alpha channel and a straight alpha. I like to render to PNGs. And I'm going to want to come in, make sure this is a PNG as well. And I'm going to want to come in and add some passes. I'm going to want a specular, a shadow. Let's go ahead and do a diffuse, a reflection, a refraction, a depth pass. Would be nice to have. I think that might be everything we need. So let's go ahead and set up our camera depth. And here in the details, I'm going to want a rear blur. And I'm going to want to go ahead and change my focus distance. Bring it way back here. So that way, just the background is going to get blurred out. I'm going to want it to fall off pretty quickly. You know what, in fact, let's go ahead and do a front blur as well. That way we'll have a nice short depth of field. There we go. All right. So that's where these guys will end up. Let's go back to the beginning. And let's go ahead and fix these here. Target. There we go. Now we can bring this back out to there. We didn't do our target animated here, so our target's going to be off. So let's fix that real quick. There we go. Now if we look, we'll be able to see pretty clearly. Yeah. That's going to keep that area in focus the whole time. Okay, perfect. So let me save this guy, go back to my render settings, and I think we're going to be good. I will go ahead, get this rendered, and then I will see you in After Effects for the compositing. Okay, and we're back. So I made a couple changes to the file based on seeing the first render, and it was just some material and animation changes, nothing really beyond what we already looked at. But I brought my 3D file in here to After Effects, and if you're using at least R15 and Adobe's CC, you have the ability to bring in your Cinema 4D file and extract the scene data, which I want that camera. So I'm just going to delete everything else out. I don't need the file anymore. I'm going to open up my renders, and I'm going to drop in everybody. Bring in my reflection, my shadow, my specular, and I did an ambient occlusion pass as well, just to add a little extra to it. So I'm going to multiply the ambient occlusion. I will multiply my shadows, reflections, and specular. I'm going to screen those, and my depth pass is fine down there. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off for a moment. And if we play it through, hold on, let me close some stuff here. There we go. There we go. Okay. And that's looking pretty good. So what I want to do is create a nice background here. And to do that, I'm just going to grab a sunburst that I made in Photoshop, and it's just this little pattern. I'm going to drop it all the way to the bottom here. I'm going to kind of line it up. I'm going to turn on its 3D layer. Oop, and we'll line it up again. And let's go ahead and solo that for a minute. So I want to make sure that it moves correctly, which it does, but I'm going to want to go ahead and rotate it. I'm going to grab its Z rotation, just have it go 180 degrees around. There we go. That's fun. And I'm going to grab this map and put it all the way at the bottom. And I'm going to invert my pattern. So I want to have more black than white. And then I'm just going to multiply this over the top there. And maybe turn down its opacity just a little bit. And then I'm going to take... Okay, and I'm going to come into my effects and I'm going to grab a ramp. And just gradient ramp. I'm going to drop it on here. And let's put it above the sunburst. And let's try, going to be yellow to a dark orange. And let's try overlay. Not loving that yet. Try overlay here as well. Nah, that looks bad. So maybe the ramp should be on top. Maybe soft light. Or hard light. Ah, there we go. Now I'm starting to feel that. So it is definitely choking down on the system a little bit, so just give me 1 second here. There we go. That looks pretty good. Scale this guy down a little bit. He's just looking a little too grainy for me. I want to make sure it's big enough to cover everything, but I don't want to see all those jaggy edges. Okay. So we've got a pretty good looking background. We'll go ahead and turn on our motion blur for everybody. There we go. And I think the last thing I want to do is just create a black solid. It's just going to sit under here. I'm going to feather it out a bit and expand it. So you just want to make sure that text is nicely offset and that it pops really well. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a depth pass. And we'll grab my camera lens blur. And I'm going to grab the depth pass as my layer. Just going to adjust this until the text is nice and sharp. There we go. And the background's a little fuzzy. That's good. Maybe I'll bring this up a little bit. That's too much. Too much. Yeah, I think 5 was pretty good. That looks pretty good. So the last thing I want to do for this open is just kind of add a few more fire elements just to make it nice and smoky. So I'm going to take some elements from our destruction pack, and we have some nice small fireballs that are going to serve us really well here. And I'm going to bring it back and I'm going to scale it down a little bit. Make sure it's positioned nicely. We'll do the same thing with this next one. Just scale it down. And this one I'm going to flip over so that we'll have a fireball going off of each side. Now let's add a glow to those guys. Let's have a nice wide glow. And we'll copy that effect over to the other one. Just adjust it until it looks nice and hot. There we go. And I think we'll just move these guys over until they're just about burnt off here in the open. All right, so we'll close that down. And let's add some embers, which are also from our destruction pack. And we'll grab these and put these right up front. There we go. We'll maybe go with an additive mode on these. Add a little extra glow to them. There we go. And let's see where we want these to come in. So I think about right here, we can start having them come up. And that'll just be a nice little flourish. So let's go ahead and take a preview render and see where we're at. Okay, so the only thing is I made that sunburst go a little too small, so I'm just going to come back and increase its scale so it doesn't cut itself off. And I'm going to come to my fireballs. I'm going to change these over to a screen mode, just so they blend a little better. There we go. That's a nice little logo animation. So I think the only thing left is we need to do that intro with the map burn on effect. And to make that, I'm just going to create a new composition. I'm going to call it the burn in and maybe have it be 30 frames. And I'll drop my map back here. Nice old West map texture that we used in the other part of the open. And now I'm going to create a solid. And I'm going to call this the matte black. And create another one. And call this the matte white. And I'm just going to come in with my Roto Bezier selected. I'm just going to create kind of a shape here. No real rhyme or reason, just a nice little blobby shape. Something like that. Now, I'm going to take my mask and set a keyframe. And then I'm going to shrink the whole guy down. Wait a second. Let's move this keyframe over first, otherwise we're going to have a hard time with it. So there we go. We'll shrink that down to nothing. And then we'll come over to here and we'll just kind of straighten it out a little bit. Just change these points around. Just a little. Don't need to do anything too crazy with it. And now let's take it and we will bring it all the way out. Zoom out so we can see it all the way. There we go. All right. So now we've got a nice little animating mat. Okay, so first thing I want to do is roughen up the edges of this guy a little bit. And to do that, I'm going to throw on turbulent displacement. There we go, something like that. Just to tweak out those edges so they animate a little bit. And then I'm going to throw on turbulent distortion. And I'm going to bring the scale. There we go. That looks nice. Nice and organic. Just play that through. Speed is good. Okay, so let's go ahead and we will pre-comp these guys into burn mat. Now I'm going to take a black solid and I'm going to have that as a Luma mat. And then I'm going to duplicate, and let's go ahead and change our black one to a red char. Have a nice bright red color there. Just offset that a couple frames. And then we'll go one more time, duplicate that. And we'll change this guy over to a yellow char. And we'll offset this guy a couple of frames. There we go. Now what we want to do is make one more copy of our mat, bring it to the top, then we'll pre-comp all of these ones and call it the burn in, and we will have that there we go, Luma inverted. We'll wipe that whole thing away. Actually, you know what, instead of doing it that way, let's do it all in one stroke, and we will go stencil or silhouette Luma on this guy, turn him on, there it is. And that'll wipe away the whole mat for us. Now all we have to do is come here and add a little glow. So let's go ahead and maybe overlay that, and we'll add a nice little hot glow for it. Its intensity, so we find something we like, and there we go. Maybe that yellow is a little too intense, so I'll come here to my hue saturation, I'll go into my yellows, and I'll just bring that down a little bit, maybe brighten it up a little bit. There we go. That looks pretty fun. So now I can take my two comps here, drop this into a new one, and we'll call this the BBQ Pig Cookers Open. And let's see what we've got. That's looking pretty good. The only thing I think I want to do is come in here and give this a little bit of animation and motion. So we'll go position, and we'll go rotation, and we'll set some keyframes here, and maybe that. There we go. go scale, bring it up a little bit. Let's go ahead, make this the start position, and we'll just push it forward a little bit and just give it a little more rotation as it goes. There we go. And we'll move these keyframes to the end. And I think we've got a very nice open here for our barbecue show featuring people who like to cook pork. And I think that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned something that you can use in your work. If you have any questions, please hit me up on either Twitter or Facebook or in the comments. Thanks again for watching. Go and create.